What's up, fellas? In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some possible traded veterans around the league, because a lot of times, we take a look at big name trades. We look at, of course, the Harden trade prior to it actually happening. We're looking at possible Bradley Beal trades, but these are some under the radar guys, some veterans that as we get closer to the March 25th trade deadline could possibly be moved to teams like Brooklyn, as we talked about in the earlier video today, or any number of contenders around the league that are looking for that typical, difference maker trade deadline deal. These are all possible players that could get moved in that type of scenario, and that's what we're going to be taking a look at in today's video. And as always, if you have some other trade ideas or some other players you think could possibly get moved, leave those down in the comment section below. I picked 10 here, but there are certainly more that you could put on this list if you wanted to. But quickly, before we get started, if you're new here, what's up? My name's Tucker. I upload NBA content on this channel twice a day, every single day. So if you're looking for consistent NBA content, this is a great place to be. You can go and sub to the channel down below. And if you enjoy this kind of content, then be sure to leave a like rating on it. It helps me out a ton. It doesn't take very long at all and helps get the video out to more people on YouTube. And you can check me out at various socials at the bottom of the screen. They're in a link tree down in the description below. Every single social media I have is in that link tree if you guys want to check that out. With those things said, let's go ahead and get started. So first up on the list, we're going to go through these relatively quickly because there's not a ton to talk about in terms of the circumstances in which they could possibly be traded, and that section gets a little bit redundant. It's more so just throwing out some names. And first up is Mason Plumlee, a guy that, I made fun of the Pistons for signing because of the money and because of, just the circumstances of their roster, but it's not because Mason Plumlee is a bad player. Mason Plumlee can play. He can defend a little bit. He's still a pretty good athlete, can rebound, is a pretty underrated passer, and is someone that, for example, someone like Brooklyn or someone like Boston or something like that could certainly use on their roster. Anybody that needs big man depth and is not afraid to pay Mason Plumlee $8 million for the next, this season and 2 more, should absolutely take a look at trading for Plumlee. I didn't put Derrick Rose on this list, but of course, he is someone that could possibly be moved as well. The only reason he wasn't mentioned is because I talk about him so much, I feel like, in every single one of these trade videos. But pretty much anybody there in Detroit outside of Jeremy Grant and the young guys is available to be traded, in addition to Blake, of course. But he is not on this list because he doesn't really fit with the rest of these players. But Mason Plumlee, if you're looking for some big man depth, could be a trade deadline guy. Next up now, PJ Tucker, a guy that we talked about in the first video of the day today, is someone that I think teams are going to definitely want to take a look at bringing in as a wing defender, as a guy that can knock down some corner threes, as a guy that is just going to give energy and effort. It's going to provide defense and can play up a couple positions if you need him to as well. That has a lot of value to a lot of different teams, and of course he is a unrestricted free agent this offseason, but still, teams that are really pushing for a potential title this season don't really care about free agency in the offseason. They're trying to get as many good players on the roster as they can to deal with as many situations as they can in the postseason, and those situations can include having to deal with teams that are going significantly smaller than maybe you typically would, and having PJ Tucker on your roster certainly helps counteract that and make that a possible adjustment for your team. So he's another guy that I would keep an eye on. Third up now on the list is maybe a weird one, maybe one you didn't think about, and it's Terrence Ross of the Orlando Magic, because I honestly think Orlando's season is over. Like, they might hover around 500 for a little bit, but given the injuries to obviously Jonathan Isaac prior to the season and Markelle Fultz during the season, I think it's pretty clear that they're not really going to be able to do anything significant this season. And as they continue to slide down the Eastern Conference standings, I think Terrence Ross is a player that other teams could potentially excite. The possibility of trading for him could potentially excite them. So he's a guy that can really shoot the ball, is a streaky 3-point shooter, not going to do a ton for you defensively, isn't the best decision maker, but if you're looking for like J.R. Smith light, Terrence Ross can knock down some shots. He makes, I think, like $13 million a year, so the salaries aren't too difficult to match, and he signed, longer term for the next couple of seasons. So if you're looking for a longer term piece that is going to, be a good shot maker for you for the next couple of seasons, then Terrence Ross is a guy to take a look at there in Orlando if they do become interested in possibly moving him. Next up now, fourth on the list, Al Horford, of course. There's really a trio of Oklahoma City Thunder players here that are going to go on this list. It's Al Horford, it's George Hill, and it's Trevor Ariza. The Oklahoma City Thunder, despite the fact that they're around a 500 team right now, their goals are way more based in the future and in the long term. And so any decent veteran on the roster that they think has value, they're going to at least explore a trade possibility for them. And that includes Al Horford, despite the longer term contract, is still a good player. George Hill is still a really good player. Showed that last year for Milwaukee as a team that, had their eye on potentially contending for a title. George Hill can shoot, can handle the ball a little bit still as well, someone that can be valuable. And then Trevor Ariza, who's an expiring contract and has bounced around to a ton of different teams, but someone might be able to talk themselves into a couple of seconds in exchange for Trevor Ariza as a little bit of wing depth and shooting depth. I don't know if he still has it or not, but he's someone that you could definitely take a look at possibly as being moved in this type of scenario. Now we move on to one. The next couple are actually really, really interesting. This one is Rudy Gay. Let's just assume for a second that the Spurs continue to be around a 500 team, maybe slightly better. But then, as we get closer to the deadline, they start to slide a bit, or maybe they suffer an injury or whatever the case may be. I know that they really like Rudy Gay, but he's someone that definitely would hold value around the league. He's got a big expiring contract. He's a bigger wing that can shoot, can defend a little bit, is a pretty good passer, and fits right in pretty well to what a lot of different teams want to do, and wouldn't require a ton of value in order for San Antonio to part with him. Again, considering the fact that he is an unrestricted free agent, and the fact that, their goals ideally should be more focused on the long term anyway. So if you're someone that is interested in making a move for a nice wing defender that can shoot a little bit as well, I would take a look at Rudy Gay if you have the ability to match his around $14 million salary for this season. Next up now, another one that is just, if the team starts to go downhill, then Ricky Rubio could be a guy that potentially could be moved. If you're looking for just a solid point guard that's going to defend, isn't going to be a knockdown shooter, but can make some threes and is going to be able to play make for you, Ricky Rubio is a guy I would possibly look at bringing in, because Minnesota has plenty of guards and perimeter guys that they need to get minutes and develop throughout the season anyway. And, as we get closer to the deadline, if they're still, the worst team in the West record-wise, then getting value out of Rubio would not be a bad idea. They've got Malik Beasley. They've got Josh Okogie out there, potentially trying to do some things. Of course, Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell. And at a certain point, it makes more sense to get value out of Ricky Rubio rather than continuing to play him, either over those guys or just taking minutes away from those guys. And so I would potentially look at maybe going to get someone like Ricky Rubio if I really needed another nice backcourt player in my rotation as a championship contender. Two more now, and the next one is Cody Zeller, another team, again, Charlotte, that is just kind of around that 500 mark, but isn't likely to be too much in contention for the postseason. An expiring contract there in Cody Zeller, and someone that can do some things for you. Good screener, rebound a little bit. Not an outstanding defender, but he's solid, right? Like, he's going to at least get in the way of some guys. And then you have that expiring contract as well. So if you want to kind of, get a big and then possibly re-sign him afterwards, or open up some salary cap space the following season, and that's something that you need on your roster is just a bigger body, then Cody Zeller could be a nice player for you. Someone I would definitely take a look at, calling Charlotte and saying, hey, what would it take to potentially get someone like Cody Zeller? And then last up, number 10, someone from Chicago, Garrett Temple, who's a solid player. Like, Garrett Temple can shoot the ball. He's turned himself into a nice little two guard. And if Chicago, wants to potentially move him, if their season isn't going as well as they'd hope that it would, then he could be someone certainly that could provide them some value in exchange. A couple of second round picks, maybe a decent player or something. I don't know. Wouldn't require too much. And then you get some nice shooting on the roster. So those are all guys on this list that are definitely some under the radar, just typical like trade deadline veteran type deals that we see in the NBA all the time to possibly take a look at as we get closer to that deadline there on March 25th. But that is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, be sure to check out the boxes on screen. You can also sub to the channel as well for consistent NBA content. Leaving a like rating on the video helps me out a ton as well, like I mentioned in the beginning, and you can check me out at various socials at the bottom of the screen in a link tree down in the description below. With all those things said, hope you guys have an awesome rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.